works to create a short squeeze. And we also dabble a little bit in the likelihood that there's been some insider trading. It's just a question of the number of people involved has been so huge that it's going to be, I think, very, very hard to prosecute. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, would like some better ideas on investing and trading, please join us on Patreon. So, what a wild period right now for Tesla. There are sort of two components of this I'd like to go through. The first is, um, sort of our headline of short squeeze action. And the second part is we'll sort of get into this whole discussion of insider trading and what's going on there. So basically, there are all these signs about how Tesla's going to do for a quarter. Elon has developed a process where the quarter's going to be great. Why? Because the first opportunity he has to talk about the numbers from the quarter, it would be articulated. And so when we went into day two and we hadn't heard anything, I thought it was a very clear sign that the stock was going to tank because we were going to have a large number of folks who were hoping for good numbers. Elon was going to delay, and the more days delay, therefore horrible numbers, therefore great time to short. Now, usually you have to go stair step. So what I mean by that here is that you typically have to lay out the landscape and then follow on with the analysis. So as you all know, there are people called shorts, or people who are betting the stock price will go down. Elon particularly hates shorts, especially Bill Gates when he's shorting. And so there is a little game that goes on Wall Street, which is there are companies that will go to the SEC and see what the positions are, particularly the short positions for hedge funds. And then what they'll do is to try to create the environment in terms of where the stock price is of a company to force those shorts to capitulate. So a capitulation, if you want to see examples of how this worked, there's a company called outpost.com. And it's one of the most famous sort of short situations because what happened is Goldman Sachs helped, I believe, some former employees get cash from large pension funds that they would manage, about $3 billion. And so they knew intimately the covenants that governed those shorts. So what what Goldman did was they actually forced the stock against the shorts to the point where the shorts had no choice but to sell out. So I'm bringing that up today because from a short standpoint, we're in a really interesting position right now. As you know, the stock price is up about 50 bucks in the last 24 hours. Um, Obviously it'll close out the day. It's 3:23 now, 4 o'clock is when it ends. But we're in a really interesting position. Why? Well, the answer is something that I developed called the 3-day rule. So the stock has continued to rise, but you notice today that we went like 246, 247, then dropped back to 231 and started rising again. So there's a question that sits there for several firms that are in the hedge fund world. Should I get out now or allow the 3-day rule to hit and get blown out? Blown out mean put out of business. So what's happening right now in the process of investing is those that can move very quickly to change positions, either positive or negative, or get out, have done so. The next group that we're waiting on is what are the large institutions that are not just indices doing and going to do with their money going forward. Now that we're getting positive comments by different analysts, it suggests that this creates cover for those large institutions to begin buying Tesla once again. So we're going to know exactly what this is about, I would say by Friday, which is 3 days from when uh, the production numbers were known. And so what's going to start happening, I believe there, based on what just happened, a lot of the hedge fund guys used to work as what are called buy-side investment managers. And so those guys know the metrics that drive everything that happens for those large funds and how they'll be investing their funds. So what I believe is going to happen is that there are hedge funds that need to get out, and therefore they have to buy the stock and stop shorting it. And if they don't buy it in time, they could end up with the stock spiking up into the 370s or 270s, maybe even 300. And so what you'll see happen is you'll see an up and then you'll see a down where the stock will come back down from a peak, and you'll be sitting there going, man, did I miss that whole opportunity to make some money? Not really, because what literally happens is there are short firms that specialize in putting other firms out of business and making money in the process. There's a show called The Wire, and one of the things I always found interesting is there are certain drug dealers who specialize in robbing drug dealers, because those drug dealers can't go to the police because they got robbed by another drug dealer and they're a drug dealer. So similar kind of idea here where hedge funds understand how the covenants work that certain hedge funds are operating under. And all they have to do is get the stock price to do something like spike very high by forcing the stock price up. And they could end up wiping out competitors. And in the process of doing so, they could make a huge amount of money by doing this process. So I believe, it's been a long time for Tesla, at least 2 quarters, if not 4 quarters, since we've had the hedge funds go into, I want to call it hedge fund war, where there are certain firms that make money shorting, there are certain firms that make money as the stock rises, and there are other firms that make money focused on destroying other companies that are exposed. There are 2 examples of that I want to ask you to look up. One is called long-term capital management, got blown out by the hedge funds, nearly tanked the whole market. And I'd like to ask you to read up on a company called outpost.com and what happened with the hedge funds there against the company. Goldman got sued for that one. I don't know if there was a settlement or anything, but it was explained exactly how this process works. So the question that comes up is, well, wait a second, I'm a standard investor. I'd say half of my viewers are long-term investors in Tesla. The other half maybe do a little bit of trading, but in general, they're long-term investors. So the question is, well, what's going to happen over the next few days? And I believe what we're going to see is we're going to see still a nice spike in the stock price of Tesla from, let's say, Friday into middle of next week. And as that price is spiking, there are a lot of firms that are going to have to figure out, should I get out now Thursday because it's the apex of the price for a certain period of time? Should I try to just wait until Friday or into next week? Because many of those hedge funds are losing money, but they have to get out because they're in jeopardy of blowing the covenants under which they're governed. So the answer is nobody knows right now, but unfortunately, I just think that Elon has done a setup process that allows the winners to be those that are long Tesla stock. So we'll update you as we're seeing this happen, but don't be surprised if you see a spike in this stock. I really think that's where we're going with this. And then we get a pullback, and then you wait for the next round of operating earnings or something like FSD operating in order to start the natural process of the stock rising again. The next thing I wanted to review today is, can you spot insider trading? What do I mean by that? Well, let's go back through the data again. Tesla's stock price started charging north right after Elon uh, was approved for his $56 billion pay package. Now, that on itself is somewhat good because he indicated that he'd be more redoubled in his efforts. Um, the other part of that, though, is that now we have this weird situation happening where, once we got above 190, the stock price started rising. And I was reminded by one of my trading buddies, Sam, that they had all these images from satellites of all the Teslas that were stacked up unsold. Now, that kind of makes sense, but the problem with that image is that because greater than half, more, depending on the time of year, 60% of those vehicles were pre-ordered. And we also had leftovers from the previous quarter in terms of 45,000 vehicles that might have been out there. So I'm bringing all this up to you because we're now in a very interesting period where how can a stock price rise up to 213? It did pull back into the, 200-ish range, and then obviously went off to the races. But the amount of capital that was being put into a stock that was expected to do horrible is truly amazing. And the one piece of data that I have come up with that I think fit this is the 14% employee reduction meant that those people, there was a group of people who had a very good idea what those numbers were going to look like, and they're no longer working for Tesla because they got fired. So as my buddy Sam pointed out, he said, look, that's a heck of a severance package to know that data at such a critical moment. So there are people who are buying call options in the 205, 200 realm, and the stock is at 250. So we're talking 10, 20 times your money in 24 to 48 hours. Amazing. And I think things are going to keep rolling in the direction they are right now, for now, but it will settle down. But we really need to get through that 3 to 5 days after the news came out zone before we actually can understand where we are and where we're going to stay in this whole process. The answer is put your seatbelt on, because you could see the stock accelerating more, not because the news was so great, but just because Elon is working on the side of those that want to decapitate the hedge funds and wealthy folks who've been shorting him. At any rate, want to thank you for taking time out to join us for our sort of Tesla update and the hedge fund battle. Next, wanted to review, as usual, our health tips. Again, I just wanted to remind you that one of our viewers asked that we sort of diversify the things we're covering. The one other thought that I had that you might want to consider based on a conversation with a researcher at the NIH in the psychology space was he recommended learning how to play an instrument or taking dance lessons. And the reason is that your neural pathways tend to, have you ever had a walkway that's in the grass where the more people that walk over it, you develop a path? Similar idea with your brain. You develop these pathways that are very carefully worn down. And the question is, how do you generate new pathways? Because it opens up your mind. And one answer is learning new things, for example, a dance class or some other activity in that realm that causes your brain and motor functions, etc., to do different things. So I wanted to encourage you to consider something like this. Let us know, how it's going for you. Let's stick with the 25 leg lifts a day, both legs. Let's also remember, it was recommended by a dentist that you do hydrogen peroxide once a week, a capful to a full cup of water as a way, for gum and dental health as well. At any rate, thanks for joining us. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Tschüss, au revoir, hitro, khoda hafez, drajje, ni hama, kambawa, heido, namaste, salamu alaikum. And in Jamaica, we say enough respect, walk good man. Arrivederci.